How is everyone doing today? It is another episode of the 26 Touchline. Approximate countdown for when the World Cup starts, just 73 days away. Again, if you've got any information, any questions that you want answered, this is the podcast to listen to. This is the place to go. Last time we talked with Oral Roger State University head coach Jake Simpson. Today we are talking with John Polis. John, I appreciate you for being here. You think you could give us a quick, brief intro about you and what you've done with the United States Soccer Federation and everything you've done in your role with PR?
I was a sports writer in Oregon back in 1975, and they brought a professional team to town, and I was tired of writing headlines and asked the sports editor, hey, if you haven't given that sports beat out, I'd like to try soccer. Anyway, I got it. It changed my life. I became a reporter that covered the first edition of the Portland Timbers in the North American Soccer League. From then I continued to do things in the game. Wound up at the U.S. Soccer Federation, Director of Communications at U.S. Soccer for a number of years. Was at soccer manufacturer Umbro for a long time as their public relations person. And, did a number of things in the game that kept me active, and I've continued to follow it ever since.
Now, you were there the first time in about 30 years at the time, in 1990. The United States qualified for the World Cup. You already know we needed a win against Trinidad and Tobago to qualify. Trinidad needed a tie. We ended up getting out of there with the win. You go with the team to the World Cup in 1990. Doesn't work out, don't really make much of a run, but you've been following the team in one way or another, whether it's journalism, PR, or just working at a World Cup through whatever news anchor, or just following it from the comfort of your own living room. What would you say the biggest change from the United States and from just internationally as a whole, would you say the biggest change in the game has been since 1990 to now?
Well, in those days, we took a team of basically college kids to the World Cup. Some of them had been out of college a little bit. We had, most of them were not professionals. And so it was a big, big challenge to get there. Most people didn't think we'd make it. Mm-hmm. We hadn't made it for 40 years from 1950. And we embarked on a qualification schedule that was brutal in CONCACAF. Mm-hmm. That meant trips to Honduras and Trinidad and Guatemala, all those tough trips. And it got down to the last game. But the biggest difference was no one thought we could make it, and we were under the gun because most teams we played had full professionals on the team.
Mm-hmm. And you were just here with a couple collegiate athletes at best.
Well, they were good college players, mm-hmm. and some had limited professional experience, but it was a big challenge. And the U.S. Soccer Federation at the time was determined to make this World Cup. We had our designs set on becoming more of a factor in the world game. Mm-hmm. The people that were elected to lead the U.S. Soccer Federation were determined to take the national team to a different level. And the Federation was strapped for cash in those days. They had a gear agreement with Adidas, but it wasn't for very much money. And so they had to really be creative to make ends meet. And then it got down to that one big game in Trinidad.
Mm-hmm. And then fast forward a little bit, 1994. The big thing about this World Cup, at least from a U.S. point of view, is the United States is hosting the World Cup this year. Obviously, here in the summer, co-hosting with Mexico and Canada, so there's a little bit of a difference there. But are you seeing any similarities between when the 1994 World Cup came to the United States and what's happening now in terms of getting ready for the World Cup, not just from the U.S. soccer point of view, but just the world's reaction to everything?
We're working with professional players now. Mm-hmm. We have many players in Europe now, and the majority of our team will be players with European experience. So when they come back, they're not necessarily stepping into an environment that they haven't been in before.
Right.
Back then, when we flew to Switzerland for a 3-week training period before that World Cup, we were novices, and everybody was wondering, what would the U.S. be like? We have a little bit more knowledge now of how we're going to do. We were competitive the last time out, and so with this team fairly well prepared and a coach with a lot of international experience, I think it's set up for us to, if we play well, to have one of our best ever World Cups.
And then what would you say you've noticed from the outside looking in, the rest of the world looking at the topic of the World Cup being in the United States? Are there any similarities to how the world reacted to it in 1994 to now?
Some, which surprised me. I used to get calls in my office at U.S. Soccer in Chicago from journalists who were obviously miffed because the U.S. was going to host. They could not figure out why they gave it to us. And Mr. Polis, I have a question for you. America is not known for soccer. In fact, I don't think you have a pro league there, right? No. What if they have the games there and nobody comes? It's a true story. They used to ask that kind of thing. And as it turned out, of course, the 1990 World Cup was the most successful ever in terms of sold out stadiums and revenue generated. It was a great event put on by a great World Cup organizing committee. This time out, it's split between 3 countries. There are no local organizing committees like they did before. FIFA has come in and done everything.
Okay.
So they'll go into the venues and organize everything. So if anything, there may not be quite as much pre-event enthusiasm as there was in 1994.
And everyone at the time was in charge of planning everything themselves.
Yeah, there's some of that, but not quite as different. So, and then we've got 48 teams this time, 48 instead of 24. That means instead of 64 or 60 or so games, there's 104 games being played in 39 days. So it's going to be a busy schedule. There'll be games on live television the whole time. Back in 1990, when we went to Italy, I believe the broadcast rights were held by TNT and Turner Sports, and they carried the 3 U.S. games and maybe a few others. That was it. That was it. To watch the games, you had to watch it on a foreign network.
Right.
But since around '94, all the games are broadcast live. Every single game is live. So whether you go to an event or you stay home and watch it, you can see everything.
Now, you mentioned earlier there's more games this year. The first thing I want to ask you is, do you think that's going to benefit not necessarily U.S. as a team, but just the culture of soccer in the U.S. at all?
I don't know that it'll affect the culture of soccer in the U.S., but for me it's interesting. I'm always interested in, are there any underdogs in a tournament, and is there a chance for an upset? And we're going to get a chance to see that. Is there a chance for a big upset? Probably not, but sometimes it happens. I mean, we've got the Cape Verde Islands that have qualified this year, and you've got the tiny island of Curacao, which absolutely went up against Jamaica a couple of weeks ago and beat Jamaica, and they go automatic. First time in the history. Curacao is in, Jamaica's in a playoff now. We'll see if they make it. But I like those games, and certainly it's exciting for the smaller countries who don't really have a chance to make it to go to the world's biggest sporting event. And I think the drama of a little nation going up, and not even if they beat someone of their own caliber, to get a win at the World Cup's a big deal.
So we talked to Jake Simpson about it the last episode.
Yeah.
He said he was kind of 50-50 on it. He was torn a little bit because on one hand it does give a chance for that underdog story, but at the same time, feels like there are already a couple teams that make it into the World Cup that didn't necessarily say have no business being there, but they're not on the same caliber as a England or Germany or a Brazil or any of the teams that you might pick to win.
But by the same token, England and some of those teams are playing Malta and places like that in Europe for qualifying. So there's at least a couple of teams that had an enormously easy qualifying. They had 3 weak teams and 1 average one, and they had to just win 3 games and they were in. So when you talk about CONCACAF, the fact that Curacao qualified in CONCACAF is a brutal place to qualify. The travel is difficult. The weather is dodgy. It's usually hot during qualifying. Teams have to travel a long ways, and so if you get through, a team like that, it's real interesting. Same thing with the African nations. You get Cape Verde Islands. They're way out, away from everybody, and it'll be interesting to see the team they put together. Like we saw New Caledonia in the playoffs. Team came in, played them tough for about half an hour, and hung in there but lost. But it's good to see how they do.
Do you think there's anything that gives European teams an advantage, or do you think there's anything that gives teams from, say, South America an advantage as far as the World Cup being on the Western Hemisphere? It could be weather, it could be travel, or it could just be players as a whole. Because on one end, we've seen the argument that being a player, for example, that's from Brazil but plays in Europe, playing with the best level of competition, but is also used to that weather, used to that travel.
There's nothing like experience, because when you get to a World Cup, the environment is totally different. If you're a rookie coach and you've been to the World Cup, it's a different animal coaching at the World Cup. First of all, you get your team there. It's behind the scenes stuff. When you choose your team, sometimes you want to choose the best athletes, but sometimes some best athletes are left home because they don't mix in well. That a coach might not think it's the right group because you're together 5, 6, 7 weeks, all that time. You're living together, eating together, spending all your time together, so the right mix of players. On the weather side, it's going to be hot in the United States, and so it can be difficult. I remember the 1994 World Cup when Brazil played Holland, the Dutch, in Dallas. It was brutally hot down there. You get teams like if Denmark makes it, or any of these other northern teams that might have a difficult time. I think a lot of folks feel that the teams from South America are more used to the heat, but then we also have to remember that it's getting towards the winter by the time the World Cup starts in the Southern Hemisphere. So all those teams are coming out of a cooler climate up here.
Right.
That might be welcome, because it was cold. But it's a little bit easier these days because FIFA mandates water breaks and things like that for the players. You go 90 minutes without stopping in heat, it gets dangerous. So so those things could help, could affect it a little bit.
And then the one other thing I want to ask you about, the big thing, because we talked about the weather way more than I ever thought we would as far as an international tournament goes. Do you think there's anything travel-wise, because there hasn't been a World Cup very similar to a situation where there's 3 nations hosting. There are teams like USA, in their group stage, they're going to play 2 of their 3 games in Los Angeles. So there's going to be little to no travel there. But there are also going to be teams who their first game might be in Dallas. Their second game might be in New York. Their third game may be somewhere in Mexico. And then they get to the elimination stages. Now it's back to Dallas, for example. Do you think anything like that is going to give any certain teams an advantage?
I think FIFA has worked to minimize that. And I think if you look at the schedule, you'll probably see that there isn't as much of that as we might expect. some of the teams might be down in Mexico for 2 games.
Mhm.
They're not gonna, they want to minimize travel because that is difficult. And in the United States, it's a big country.
Right.
It's not like when they were like in Qatar, where they had like four fields,
Right.
you know, in the same area. So FIFA's pretty good at this as far as arranging travel and making sure that they can make it. But you know, all of the rigors of a World Cup, and I mentioned, you know, coming over, finding a base to train, and where your players going to stay. Are they going to stay in a dormitory type environment? Are they going to be in a hotel? Are you going to be in a training center of a university? Where do they? When I traveled with the Brazilians in the '94 World Cup and the Olympics in '96, we went to a hotel and scouted out one whole floor of the hotel that the Brazilians had to have, because the press are everywhere with Brazil following them around.
Right.
They wanted peace and quiet. So the actual digs that the players stay in, it has to be scouted out in advance. How long does it take them to walk to meals? How long does it take? Where does the bus pick us up? You know, all of that stuff. It's incredible amount of details. And having been inside probably 4 or 5 FIFA World Championship event camps with teams, those details are so important. And then the other part is, can you keep the players, you know, downtime? What do they do? You know, sometimes the team might just go out on an outing somewhere, or they might want to change it up, but all those things are figured in. So you know, hopefully teams can, you have the right mix of players there, the team is ready to play, and they play their best soccer, and they do the best they can. But so many things can affect it besides the games themselves.
The last thing I want to ask you before we close this up, I have a list of teams who are qualified for the World Cup. We did this with Jake last week. I'm going to ask you the same thing. We're going to go through the groups. You're going to tell me who you think is going to win each group. Now, because the play-in teams haven't been decided yet, we're just going to focus on who is already qualified, who's ready to go, who already knows they're in.
Picks?
Yes, sir. I'm going to make you choose who you think is going to win each group.
Okay.
So we're going to start with Group A. You've got Mexico, South Africa, and the Korea Republic.
I would go with Korea Republic.
Really?
Yeah, and Mexico right in there, right behind them. Mexico's playing at home, so that's a big advantage. 2 teams that have not played in Azteca Stadium, assuming they are in Azteca for all 3 games, it's a very difficult place to play. So that will have a big advantage there. South Korea is always tough, but Mexico hasn't been playing all that great since I've seen them over the last 6 to 8 months. So I'll go with South Korea there.
And then for Group B, it's Canada, Qatar, and Switzerland.
Probably first choice Switzerland. And Canada has played pretty well under Jesse Marsh in the last couple outings, which they were in the last World Cup. So they should challenge well, but I'll go with Switzerland on that one.
For Group C, Brazil, Morocco, Haiti, and Scotland.
Brazil, of course. Brazil's always, you kind of always pick them towards the top of the group. Morocco was the darlings of the last World Cup. They were terrific, and you know, that could be an upset. We saw Brazil lose a preliminary game, a warm-up game to France, and they weren't playing that well, so they might have their hands full with Morocco, but I'll stick with Brazil.
For Group D, the United States, Paraguay, and Australia are who's made it in.
U.S. and Paraguay are probably the top teams in that group. Yeah, we'll see how the U.S. plays. You know, we can't really predict how they are. We have a great chance with a lot of players that are accomplished pros in Europe, which is makes it different from the past World Cups, except the last World Cup was similar. Paraguay, I believe we beat them earlier this year, so I'll give the edge to the U.S. in that group.
And then for Group E, Germany, Curacao, Ivory Coast, and Ecuador.
Germany for sure. The Germans are always ready to play. One thing I've been watching them over the years, they can be down 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. I saw them down 4-0 to Brazil in a friendly about 20 years ago, and the game ended up 4-4. They never give up. They just don't lose focus, and so the Germans will be there at the end.
For Group F, Netherlands, Japan, and Tunisia are the three teams who have made it in.
Netherlands are my pick. Lots of experience. They have the team is similar to the one that was in Qatar, and I think they'll be the favorites in that group.
For Group G, Belgium, Egypt, Iran, and New Zealand.
Belgium for sure. A lot of their great players that came through over the last couple of World Cups are gone now, but they still have talent. They got Kevin De Bruyne. They got the winger Doku, who's got a lot of talent, plays for Man City. So I think they'll be there.
And the next group, we're going to look at Group H. Spain, Uruguay, Saudi Arabia, and Cabo Verde.
Spain. A lot of people pick Spain to win the whole thing. They're one of the best teams in the world right now. They're well coached. Pedigree is great, and they will do well in that group.
Group I, France, Senegal, and Norway.
France and Norway, that's going to be a battle. Norway has perhaps the hottest goal-scoring talent in the world with Erwin Haaland. And they'll be against France, a team that has won it a number of times. I don't know. France. We'll have to see how France, with their veteran players and Mbappe, how they do. But Norway is the upstarts. They got 3 or 4 players that are big players in Europe, so I think it'd be a toss-up between those two teams.
Now, unfortunately for you, you got to pick one.
Go with France.
Group J, Argentina, Jordan, Algeria.
Argentina, defending champions. Leo Messi will be back again. They're going to be hard to beat in that group.
For Group K, you've got Portugal, Colombia, and Uzbekistan.
Portugal and Colombia will both battle it out. I mean, Portugal has the experience. And they always seem to play well in the World Cup. Colombia can be up and down, just depends. But I'll go with Portugal.
And then our last group, England, Croatia, Panama, and Ghana.
I'm a sentimental favorite here. I love the Croatians. Luka Modric is my favorite player. He continues to go. He's about the same age as Messi, and he's still going. He's a small player. A quarterback, runs the whole show, and I'll pick Croatia to edge out England in that group.
And then the last thing I'm going to ask you, who is your pick to go on and win the whole thing?
Very difficult. I'll pick Spain.
But final say here, Spain going all the way from John Polis. Thank you guys for tuning in to the next episode of the 26 Touchline. You can find us here at the YouTube channel. You'll also be able to listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, for John Polis, this is Jacob Grobelby, and we will see you next time.